and to WCPI.
Bill, it's good to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
We sometimes take advantage of our speakers at McMinnville Noon Rotary, and we try to persuade them to come over, and we have these conversations. And thank you for taking this time to be with us today. There's so many subjects that I'd like to talk about, but for those who may not know a lot about Senator Corker's background, the program from Noon Rotary said that when he was 25 years old, he started out with $8,000 in savings in a pickup truck in the construction business, and that blossomed into building shopping centers in 18 states. Do I have that right, Senator?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you miss the construction business?
You know, I loved it so much, and the energy behind our company, which, you know, the first project that I built was $17,596, and then it grew, as you mentioned, to operate in 18 states. I loved it. I loved what happened to the people within the company as we grew rapidly and people were able to progress up. But I sold it when I was 37, started it when I was 25, learned construction, and began doing it at a very, very young age. But, you know, to be honest, the industry's changed so much. I will say I miss business tremendously. And, you know, I had a second career after selling that company of owning and operating and acquiring real estate. And I really love that too. But I can just say, generally speaking, yes, I miss business. I just love the productivity of it, and again, the energy that comes from something that's so rapidly growing.
Right. And it's something that's fairly permanent. Once you got it built, it's there.
Well, that's true.
I'm sure the quality you put into your construction, it's still there, right?
Well, I sure hope so. And actually, one of the shopping centers I built was years ago here in McMinnville. So,
right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the subjects that you raised and some of the Rotarians raised during the question and answer. First of all, as I guess now a fairly senior member of the Banking and Finance Committee, your take on the political dialogue that we always have, it comes up in every election cycle, is getting a handle on the nation's fiscal situation, on our finances, driving down the federal deficit. But regardless of who's in power, Democrats or Republicans, we never seem to cross the line on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As I said today at Rotary, I was elected 8.5 years ago. I ran. Part of the reason I ran was about our nation's fiscal issues and the fact that we continue to run up huge debts and not live within our means. And I'd like to say that something has changed, but it hasn't. I mean, it's the culture there is to always want to do things but not want to pay for them. I think, you know, I'm a Republican, and as I mentioned today at the Rotary Club, I mean, we're in the majority now, and we still ourselves are not dealing with this issue. So it is both sides of the aisle. And, you know, it's a boring issue to people. It really is.
It's not glamorous.
It's not glamorous. It's mundane. It's hard work. But what I was just at Tennessee Tech earlier today talking to students and shared with them that while it is boring and mundane from their standpoint as younger people coming along, it's going to end up being one of the biggest issues they're going to have to deal with. And I'm sad to say that our country still lives beyond its means. Again, people want things. They just don't want to pay for it. And unfortunately, I know people in our country are angry, and from what I see, they ought to be angrier than they are. At the same time, Congress is a reflection of the American people. And just right now, in America, there's just not the will to address our fiscal issues in an important way. So
it's doing the tough thing, doing sometimes the unpopular thing. If you have to cut programs or raise taxes, there seems to be a political dynamic that says, you know, we always have to look at the next election. Re-election is so important. So that brings up the issue, and a lot of people are talking about it and have been talking about it, and that's this thing called campaign finance reform. Now, since the Supreme Court Citizens United decision, it seemed to me, as one citizen, just threw the doors wide open to unlimited spending, largely from undisclosed sources. There are people like economist Lawrence Lessig who have written extensively about this. As a matter of fact, I think he's jumping into the Democratic primary, saying if he is elected, and he gets campaign finance reform done, he'll just bow out and turn the reins over to the vice president. What can be done in this money saturated politics? What can be done in a practical way?
Well, let me first move away from this last issue. I don't think that's the money issue. It has nothing to do with our fiscal policy.
Right.
Okay.
But the kind of people that we are sending to Washington, sending to the state legislatures, things like this.
Well, but I want to get to your issue, but I don't want you to think that somehow or another campaign finance has anything to do with our nation's unwillingness to deal with fiscal issues. It's human nature right now in America, and believe it or not, Congress more fully represents the American people than people think. Okay, but at the same time, for me, I'm elected as a United States Senator. It's one of the there's one of the top 3 issues that our nation faces today, and again, it's just not being dealt with. I vote against very, very popular legislation all the time. Again, because it's not paid for. I like the things that are being accomplished from the standpoint of where the money's going in many cases, but if you're not going to pay for it, then that means we shouldn't be doing it. Now, to campaign finance reform, look, I think you may disagree with me based on your opening comments, but look, I'd love to see individual candidates be able to receive larger contributions and disclose it immediately so that you know exactly who is supporting them.
Right.
Since that isn't happening, you're ending up seeing this money flow in the directions that you're talking about. And I was the victim, candidly, in a race back in 2006 when I ran for the Senate. An outside group that thought they were helping me.
Oh.
That I had nothing to do with, I had no control over, ran an ad here in the state.
The Political Action Committee.
And it hurt me tremendously. I went in a period of 7 days to I was +6. I went to -4, 10-point spread just in 7 days. So my point is that I don't like the fact that outside groups end up dominating the races. I think that individual candidates ought to have far more control. And again, if you could have much larger contribution levels to the individual candidates, but they had to disclose those immediately so everyone knew who was giving
the transparency.
That's a much better system. Much better system.
Yeah, by all means. Let's move on. As chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, you've got your plate full all the time, but particularly right now, the Iran nuclear deal. I have a copy of the agreement. It's called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. When I read it, it looked like various parties trying earnestly to carve out the best deal for themselves, which is what you would expect. But the critics of this plan, including yourself, you had an op-ed, I think, in the Washington Post. Critics of the deal say we gave away too much and we didn't get enough in return.
Right.
And you plan to vote against it when it comes up.
Yes, right.
Not exactly a confirmation vote, but it's a resolution of disapproval.
That's correct.
We expect the President Obama to veto that resolution, and then the opposition won't have enough votes to override the veto. What do you see? What do you see as the major defects?
Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time to read the agreement. And Bill, for what it's worth, there's all kinds of other documents that go with it.
This is what's visible.
That's right. So, you know, down in the classified area, we have all kinds of other documents that go with this. But I think this is a generally good outline of the deal. To me, what we've done here is, you know, the initial goal laid out by the administration was to dismantle Iran's nuclear program. That was the stated goal of these negotiations. Instead of that, what we've ended up doing is this agreement, with American approval, approves the industrialization of their nuclear program. That's quite a leap. I mean, that's a very different place from where we began. Secondly, and importantly, we lose all of our leverage in 9 months. All the major economic sanctions.
All the sanctions, diplomatic, economic sanctions are peeled
That's right.
back.
I mean, they end up with a growing economy, And on top of that, I know that you know this, but Iran has about 100 to 150 billion dollars trapped in other countries because of those sanctions.
Right.
They're going to get all that money back. So here you have a country that is the #1 exporter of terrorism in the world, creating havoc in the Middle East, much of which is being created against our friends and allies.
Through their proxies.
Through their proxies, that's exactly right. And so here they are. They're going to have 100 to 150 billion dollars more available to them to do that. They're going to have a growing economy, and with U.S. approval, they're going to be able to industrialize their nuclear program. So those are kind of minor details. I'm being facetious, but to me, that's very problematic.
How, Senator, and sure, I think the defects of the plan are coming out, the weakness of the U.S. Bargaining position. But how do you unring the bell? I mean, how do we get our allies, basically 6, including with the U.S., and that includes Russia,
and China, That's right.
How do you roll this back and say we want a better deal? How do you do that?
It's interesting. That ends up the administration has done a good job of laying that out there, and obviously people all around Tennessee and the country are repeating that. How do you do that? But, that's not what my vote is about. There's a balance of power in our country. In this case, we had to pass a law that, to give us the right on this because the president was negotiating this as what's called an executive agreement, meaning that Congress played no role in this. And I think that with a lot of work, I was able to pass a bill in Congress that at least gives us this approval process.
Also hearings. You've had hearings.
Oh, yeah. We've had 13 since June 1st and briefings, and we've had all kind of nuclear physicists and diplomats and others come in. But, Bill, here's what's before me as a senator. It's not whether China, Russia, Great Britain, France, Germany, and other countries sat down with us to enter into this deal. This is coming to me for my judgment as to whether I believe that this agreement, if Iran wants to get a nuclear weapon, will this agreement keep them from getting it? That's my vote, not over the fact that all these guys have come together, as you mentioned earlier, with different motivations, very different motivations. So I can't worry about... I would say let's go back and get a better deal. And what people forget, and again, the administration has done an artful job of putting people, making it seem like we're doing something unique here hundreds of times. Congress has sent administrations back to the negotiating table saying this is not good enough. Bill, I can't vote for a deal that I believe, if Iran wants to get a nuclear weapon, allows them to do that. So I'm sorry. Go back to the table.
Was there a time when the negotiators thought, the religious fanatics that have their thumb on top of Iran, its government, its people, that there will be a time when Iran won't have this fanatical theocracy?
No, I think there's actually part of this negotiation and the reaching of this deal was a belief by the administration that at some point in time, this the country's government is going to change operating the way they do. I think most Americans know this, but the Iranian people themselves like Americans.
Right. They love our music. They love our blue jeans.
It's the government. It's the government that is constantly death to America, death to Israel, death to America. So it's a regime that obviously, again, they're engaged in terrorist activity through proxies and directly through the IRGC nonstop. But I think what most mature negotiators have said, Bill, is look, to base an agreement on the hope that a government is going to change the way they've been operating for decades is not the way to come to terms in an agreement.
Not responsible.
You're better off coming to a tough agreement and continuing to work with folks, and maybe over time they change. But if you're basing the outcome here on the hope that Iran is going to be different, that's obviously, from my standpoint, it's not a mature place to negotiate.
Okay, that's a theory. Now here are some facts, Senator. You know better than anybody. Russian aggression, particularly on its western frontier, the land grab just basically seizing the Crimean Peninsula, its incursions into eastern Ukraine. The Baltics are very worried.
Right.
And Vladimir Putin seems to get away with it. I mean, you know, I'm not saying he's the world's #1 bully, but, you know, he's in competition for that honor.
Yeah.
So what should we be doing in cooperation with our NATO allies? I mean, what, you know, does there come a time when we stand up and we tell the Russian foreign minister that one more step? You know, we've had these bright lines, these red lines that the Obama administration has put out, but nothing happened.
Yeah.
So from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee standpoint, what should we be doing?
Yeah. Well, let me go to a red line, and then I'll lead to what you just said. I think one of the lowest moments in U.S. foreign policy in recent times was when we had the red line in Syria, with Assad using his chemical weapons. And we said if he used chemical weapons against his own people, that was a red line, and we were going to, you know, deal with it.
Do something, yeah.
Well, we didn't.
Right.
And that was in August of 2013, September of 2013. Instead, what we did, Bill, was we, figuratively, if you will, jumped in Putin's lap and negotiated this chemical weapons agreement, which, as we all know, really didn't get all the chemical weapons out because now they're being used against the Kurds and others. But that was the beginning, I think, of sending a message to our allies that you could, in the region, you couldn't really count on us. And I think Putin learned a great deal. So we end up with this issue in Ukraine. You know, we've had 70 years of U.S. policy and has been that Europe would be whole, democratic, and free. As knowledgeable as you are, I know you know the United States, entered into an agreement in 1994 with Ukraine. Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union, and they had 1,240 warheads in Ukraine. So we entered into what was called the Budapest Memorandum with them and Russia, and basically we said we would support their sovereignty if they would give up those nuclear weapons. So they gave up those nuclear weapons, and now fast forward to now what has happened. Russia's gone in and basically taken Crimea and come on into eastern Ukraine, and their goal is to destabilize the country. And as a matter of fact, what Putin's greatest victory would be in Ukraine right now is not to take it militarily, but just to destabilize it the way that he has and cause it to fail fiscally and to fail economically. Now, Bill, I felt like that we were way, way feckless as a country in pushing back against them when they had 40,000 troops on the border before they took Crimea. That was the time to me, before the genie's out of the bottle, to really push back on them with what's called sectoral sanctions, where you really push and punish their economy. So they are there now, and through propaganda, the Russian people don't really know even what's happening in eastern Ukraine. They really don't.
But Putin is still immensely popular with his people.
It's the nativism. I mean, you talk about bully. I mean, you're talking about a guy my age who rides horses with a shirt off. I mean, this is an unusual person at best. But anyway, back to the Baltics, your key point. I was in the Baltics 8 months ago. They're very nervous. And there have begun to be negotiations about Article 5 in the NATO agreement, and you know what? Article 5. That's right. That will come. It's a mutual aid. There's becoming discussions about what does that mean. And the Baltics, they're very, they're right. One of the, Estonia's right there on the Russian border, obviously. And so, look, to answer your question, we have got to ensure that the eastern portion of Europe, which has always felt like a second fiddle. We have bases in Germany and other places. We have got to make sure that the presence there is permanent and firm, and we got to make sure, warfare today, as you know, is very different. I mean, it can happen through cyber. It can happen through little green men like Russia did in eastern Ukraine. And we've got to be real clear with the Baltics that we consider those things to be an attack on their country, meaning we've got to define it in a way that people understand when Russia tries to take aggression against these countries, that we will be there to protect them. If Russia thinks that's not the case, And they think that they can get between us and our NATO allies. And they know that they threaten one of these countries, and yet we all don't agree to protect each other. They know NATO is finished. And that would be a huge victory.
Is that on his agenda?
Oh, I think he absolutely.
Undermining NATO.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. There's no question. I mean, he views and has always viewed NATO as a threat. And, you know, I'll tell you another threat to him is if Ukraine, which has moved more towards democracy now,
right,
and away from corruption, if Ukraine can be prosperous and move ahead, it's a threat to him internally because Russians will see that success, will see that prosperity, will see them having human rights that they now don't have, and so that also is a big threat to him.
Is there any doubt in your mind, Senator Corker, that the missile that took down the Malaysian airliner over Ukraine was actually fired by Russians?
No doubt in my mind.
They've denied it vigorously. The little green men, they're really Russian soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, there's no debate about that. Okay, and you know,
in spite of Putin's denials.
Yeah, there's no debate, and you know, the Russian soldiers have been killed in eastern Ukraine, and one of the issues that they've had is how do they get those Russian soldiers who have been killed back to their families and let that not be widely known in Russia. And so, you know, we've heard all kinds of things, some of which, you know, much of which we can't verify, but it is that
they are very creative.
They are very creative. They are. Yes,
sir. Turkey has recently jumped in. I guess a lot of us are wondering why they stood by so long when ISIS, the Islamic State in Levant or Syria, has been such a great threat. Well, of course, a threat and a danger in the region. You know, ISIS basically masquerading as a religious movement. We know it's basically a criminal enterprise, one of the cruelest, most barbaric criminal operations in history. But Turkey has gotten in. They let us use their bases, their forward bases, air bases, and now they have joined actually in carrying out airstrikes from their own fighter jets. Their problem with the Kurds, who have been probably the most effective fighters against ISIS that we've had, how is all this going to work out? It looks to me like it's an extremely complex puzzle. So what should we be doing? What should the United States be doing vis-a-vis Turkey and the Kurds?
Yeah, well, first of all, you know, this has been a breakthrough. It's a breakthrough that, you know, should have happened a year ago. It's not what I think people who've been working on it would have liked to have achieved, but it's certainly now, instead of flying in from the Gulf to conduct raids against ISIS, we can fly from right across the border to Incirlik and other Turkish bases, and so that saves a lot of flight time and refueling time. Our drones have the ability to be far more productive in the region. What we had hoped to do was to create a no-fly zone too, where you had tremendous amounts of, you had an opportunity for humanitarian aid to all these families that are displaced and going to Jordan and going to Turkey and going to other countries. So that wasn't accomplished, but we have, again, been able to fly. So we're beginning to build just a little bit of momentum there. Turkey does have a different view of the Kurds. I mean, by the way, there's various divisions of Kurds. You know, not all are the same. And so there is one particular group that has conducted a lot of terrorist acts for the Turkish government against their own citizens. So they're concerned about them. But then there's other sects of Kurds that, from their standpoint, are more benign. And, of course, we have a close relationship in northern Iraq with Kurdistan, if you will. They're our best fighters. They're great friends of ours. I've been there. So I was just in Erbil not long ago. Very brave. You know, the Peshmerga, as you know, are highly qualified fighters. And so what Turkey is concerned about is the northern Iraq Kurds and the Kurds in Syria and the Kurds in Turkey pulling together and forming a country that breaks off a portion of their country and still has, again, some of the terrorist activities that are taking place there. So it is complicated. And, you know, it's this is a complication. I'll tell you another complications. In Iraq, you know, our mortal enemies in Iraq, Iran, which, as I was talking at lunch today, created the, you know, these explosive devices that maimed hundreds and hundreds of Americans.
Hideous.
Hideous. I mean, just terrible. The IRGC, which is their arm that conducts many of the terrorist activities, they're prevailing. They're all through Iraq. So in Iraq, we've got our own military people that are training and advising Iraqi military, but they can look literally across the battlefield and see Shia militia from Iran, which are their bitter enemies. And yet the enemy of both of us right now in Iraq is ISIS. So it's complicated on the Turkish border. It's complicated inside Iraq. And obviously over time is going to lead to additional complexities, but right now dealing with ISIS is of the highest order, and so there's commonality in doing that.
Speaking of friends and enemies and threats and all the political complications in the region, our ally and every president has reaffirmed our friendship, calling it an unshakable alliance with the State of Israel. The Prime Minister Netanyahu has been to Congress. He was invited to Congress to come and speak against the Obama administration's objections, but he says that the Iran nuclear deal, going back to that, is one of the worst things that could have happened. We've talked about the Iran nuclear deal, but what about our relationship with Israel? You know, if Israel ever had a friend, as a matter of fact, Netanyahu said this, you know, if Israel has ever had a friend, it's the United States. How do you assess our relationship right now? You know, it's no secret that President Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu are not great pals.
No.
So what's your assessment?
Well, first of all, you know, I've been in Israel a great deal. I was with Netanyahu there not long ago. I sat down with the Mossad, their intelligence agency, which was really helpful to me in understanding where we were at that time with this Iran deal. But look, as I said today at Rotary, I'd love to say that support of Israel is only on one side of the aisle, mine, but support of Israel is very strong on both sides. It's a bipartisan, there's bipartisan support of Israel. On the other hand, at the executive branch level, let's face it, I mean, the relations between our administration today and the administration leading Israel today it's at all-time lows, okay? It's at a very low level. As I was mentioning today, I think that as we have new leadership in our own country coming up in this next election, I just have a sense that the damage that's been done because of really the personal level dislike and distrust that's taking place between the two leaders now, I think that subsides. Someone asked me today, do we think that over time the United States somehow would push it? I just don't see it happening. We've got strong, deep ties among our citizens. Forget our government officials, among our citizens, and I think that bond is going to stay. I think it's going to get stronger in about a year and 3 months.
Okay, because there will be a change. We will have a different president.
And by the way, whether we elect a Republican or a Democrat, I think it'll get stronger.
Okay. Well, you know what? I wasn't planning on asking an ambush question, but since you brought it up, I'm going to do it, Senator. Do you want to say anything about the Republican presidential, very complicated primary?
I really don't.
That's what
I've got a lot of friends running, and you know, as I've said today at Rotary, I think I said that we have 4 Republicans running. 2 of which in the Senate, I'm talking about.
Right, exactly.
And 2 of them serve on our Foreign Relations Committee. There's a Democrat who's running, and you know, the citizens of this state have given me such an opportunity that has led to me being chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. There's lots that needs to be done between now and the next presidential race, and to try to get involved in something that I'm going to have no effect on anyway.
Yeah, you'll have your one vote.
Yeah, that's right.
You might influence your family.
All it does is really, undermine my ability to make things happen in the Senate, right? So that's not a responsible place for me to be.
I cannot pry it out of you, can I?
No, you can't. I will tell you, as I said today at lunch, I am. It's been an enjoyable thing to watch from the sideline.
Mm-hmm. It's been good for TV ratings and TV advertisers, hasn't it? It's been great. Yes. Senator, thank you so much for taking this time to be with us. And I want to thank the Senator's staff. We have Micah here, and I think Brent Wiles is here somewhere, and Katie. They have been just fabulous in helping to arrange your visit to McMinnville today, and certainly do appreciate that. We've had some of our very outstanding high school students with us today, and I'm glad they had this opportunity to be with us. There's Mason Simpson over there, part of our studio audience. Good to see you, Mason. But thank you so much for taking this time, and I want to thank WCS-TV, which is the cable television outreach service of the Warren County school system, and Mr. Joe Harvey. We appreciate your being with us. And also I want to thank our listeners. We would remind you that WCPI is the nonpartisan, non-sectarian, and decidedly non-profit broadcasting service of the Warren County Education Foundation. One other thing, Senator?
Yeah, Bill, I just want to say, look, I know I'm a straight shooter, and at lunch I said some things that certainly most public officials wouldn't say. But I'm interviewed all over the world. Mm-hmm. And I'm interviewed by people who spend a lot of time delving into subject matter before the interviews take place. I can honestly tell you I've never had anyone interview me that had greater knowledge of the subject matter, nor presented the questions in such a nonpartisan way. And I just want to thank you for that. I don't know what you do when you're not dealing with insurance, but obviously you spend a lot of time understanding issues that are important to our country, and I have to tell you, it's most uplifting to be here in Warren County and to have this type of interview take place, so thank you.
Well, that's very kind of you, Senator, and I certainly do appreciate that. And as one Tennessean and as one American citizen, we are very proud when we see you on television. When you're quoted in the newspapers and magazines, we're just very proud. You make us proud. So
thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And again, thanks to our listeners. That concludes this edition of Focus. Focus is on the air 4 times each week with a subject and with guests, which we hope you will find challenging and stimulating and, above all, informative. For Focus and WCPI, this is volunteer producer Bill ZECHMAN.